You've been calling yourself lazy for months, maybe years. You sit at your desk, staring at a simple email you can't bring yourself to answer, and think, I'm just not motivated enough. But what if your brain isn't broken, and you're not fundamentally flawed? What if the thing you've been calling laziness is actually something else entirely? Something that has a name, a mechanism, and most importantly, a way out. Hey there, neurospicy folks! I'm Dr. Monty, and I'm an ADHD psychologist with a special interest in all things neurodivergent neuroscience. If you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing to my channel to help me grow and bring more scientific understanding and awareness to a larger audience. Thanks so much! A common misconception in our culture suggests that if you're not productive, you're lazy. If you can't push through, you lack willpower. If you need rest, you're weak. We've created this binary where you're either excelling or failing. And when you find yourself in that second category, the obvious explanation seems to be a character defect. Studies by organizational psychologists like Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter have revealed a fundamental misunderstanding about human motivation. Many treat the brain like a simple machine. Put in discipline, get out results. Rest when you've earned it. Push harder when you're struggling. The problem is, this model completely ignores what we now know about how chronic stress actually changes your nervous system. The truth is, there's a massive difference between choosing not to do something and being unable to do something. One is laziness, the other is burnout. And confusing the two isn't just wrong, it's actively harmful. When you're burned out and you treat yourself like you're lazy, you're essentially applying psychological pressure to a system that's already overwhelmed, like expecting a strained muscle to perform normally under additional weight. Christina Maslach at UC Berkeley has been studying this phenomenon since the 1970s, and her research revealed something crucial. Burnout isn't just severe tiredness. It's a specific syndrome with three distinct components. The exhaustion you feel isn't just in your head, it's neurological. Your prefrontal cortex, which handles executive function, shows measurable changes under chronic stress that can impair your ability to focus, plan, and make decisions. So before you download another productivity app or sign up for a 5 a.m. morning routine, let's figure out what's actually happening in your mind and body. Because the signs I'm about to walk you through aren't character flaws. They're your nervous system sending you a very clear message. Let me start with what's probably the sign you've been misinterpreting the longest. You feel exhausted, even after rest. This isn't the tiredness you feel after a long day that disappears with a good night's sleep. This is what researchers call emotional exhaustion, part of Maslach's core framework of burnout. It represents a depletion that goes deeper than your energy levels. When Maslach and her colleagues first systematically studied this in healthcare workers, they found that burned-out individuals showed persistent fatigue that didn't respond to normal recovery methods. What's happening in your brain? Chronic stress floods your system with cortisol, and over time, this disrupts your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, essentially your body's stress response system. Think of it like a car engine that's been running in the red zone for months. Even when you take your foot off the gas, the engine is still overheated and damaged. Rest feels impossible because your nervous system is stuck in a state of hypervigilance, scanning for threats that aren't there. Another pattern emerges. You've lost interest in things you used to enjoy. This relates to what Maslach identified as depersonalization, developing cynical attitudes and emotional distance from your work and relationships. This loss of interest can look similar to depression, but there's a key difference. Burnout-related loss of pleasure often starts in specific domains of your life, usually work, before spreading outward. Your brain's reward system, which involves complex pathways throughout the limbic system, starts to malfunction under chronic stress. It's like your internal motivation engine has been flooded. The activities that used to give you a sense of satisfaction, finishing a project, spending time with friends, even watching your favorite show, no longer trigger the same neurochemical response. Then there's perhaps the most commonly misunderstood pattern. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. You look at a straightforward task, responding to a text, doing laundry, making a phone call, and it feels impossibly heavy. But this isn't procrastination in the usual sense. What's happening is that your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, becomes significantly impaired under chronic stress. In a 2009 study published in Nature Reviews Neuroscience, Amy Arnsten at Yale demonstrated that even mild chronic stress impairs prefrontal function, making it harder to prioritize, plan, and initiate action. It's like trying to run complex software on a computer with 2% battery life. Everything slows to a crawl. There's also the cruel paradox where you can't turn your mind off, even when your body is at rest. You're exhausted, but you can't truly rest because your brain won't stop spinning. You lie in bed thinking about all the things you should be doing, all the ways you're falling behind, all the problems you need to solve. This happens because chronic stress keeps your default mode network, the brain's background processing system, in a state of anxious rumination. Instead of the peaceful mind wandering that should happen during rest, you get stuck in what researchers call perseverative cognition, your brain running the same worry loops over and over. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of burnout is emotional numbness or disconnection. People expect burned out individuals to be visibly distressed, but often the opposite happens. You stop feeling much of anything. You go through the motions of your daily life, but it's like you're watching it happen to someone else. This emotional blunting is actually a protective mechanism. Your brain, overwhelmed by chronic stress, starts to shut down non-essential emotional processing to conserve resources. It's like a smartphone going into low power mode. It can still function, but all the background apps that make it feel alive get shut down. Finally, there's what might be the most telling pattern of all. You feel guilty about needing rest or help. Lazy people don't feel guilty about doing nothing. They just do nothing. But when you're burned out, rest feels like moral failure. This guilt response is partly cultural, but it's also neurological. Chronic stress alters your brain's threat detection system, making you perceive your own needs as dangerous. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, starts to treat self-care as a threat to your survival, because in a hyper-competitive environment, slowing down feels like falling behind. Now, the research on burnout has some significant limitations that we need to acknowledge. Most studies have focused on workplace burnout, particularly in helping professions like healthcare and education. We're still learning about how burnout manifests in other contexts: parenting, caregiving, even social media consumption. There's also the question of individual differences. Some people seem more resilient to burnout than others, and we're not entirely sure why. Environmental factors matter. Social support, financial security, and having some control over your circumstances all influence your burnout risk. Genetic factors likely play a role too, though the specific mechanisms remain unclear. The neurodivergent community has added crucial insight to our understanding of burnout. While formal research is still emerging, many people with ADHD, autism, or other neurological differences report experiencing what's called autistic burnout, or ADHD burnout, states of exhaustion that come from constantly masking or compensating for neurological differences. This isn't the same as workplace burnout, though they can overlap. There's also the replication crisis to consider. While Maslach's core model of burnout has held up well over decades, some of the more specific neurobiological claims are still being validated. We know chronic stress affects the brain, but the exact mechanisms and their reversibility are still being mapped out. And something that might surprise you: not all exhaustion is burnout. Sometimes what looks like burnout is actually depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, or even medical conditions like thyroid dysfunction. The symptoms can overlap significantly, which is why self-diagnosis can be tricky. So what does this mean for how you think about yourself and your struggles with motivation? You can stop the self-blame spiral. If you recognize multiple patterns from what I've described, you're not lazy. You're experiencing a legitimate physiological and psychological response to chronic stress. But here's the crucial part. Productivity hacks won't fix burnout because they're addressing the wrong problem. You can't optimize your way out of nervous system dysfunction. It's like trying to improve your Wi-Fi speed when the real problem is that your router is overheating. Recovery from burnout requires addressing the root cause, chronic stress without adequate recovery. This might mean setting boundaries at work, saying no to commitments, or addressing underlying issues like perfectionism or people-pleasing. It's not about finding better time management techniques. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with stress and rest. The good news is that your brain is remarkably plastic. The same neurological changes that create burnout can be reversed with the right interventions. But this takes time, often months, not weeks. And it requires treating rest not as something you earn through productivity, but as a fundamental biological need. If you're in the midst of burnout, the most important thing you can do is give yourself permission to be human. Your worth isn't determined by your output. Your value doesn't fluctuate with your productivity levels. You're not a machine that's broken. You're a biological system that's been pushed beyond its limits and needs time to recalibrate. The key insight from this research: laziness is a choice made from a place of adequate resources. Burnout is a depletion state where choice itself becomes compromised. When your prefrontal cortex is impaired by chronic stress, when your stress response system is disrupted, when your reward pathways are malfunctioning, you're not choosing to underperform. You're experiencing the predictable result of a nervous system under siege. The path forward isn't more discipline or better habits. It's recognizing that rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's the foundation that makes productivity possible. Your exhaustion isn't a character flaw. It's information. And the sooner you start listening to it, the sooner you can begin the real work of recovery.